I just like wrote like a very long email on like my big sister's coach's behalf to an organization principals. So like in terms of having like yeah, just like so it's an amendment. So you have to because it's an amendment to the Constitution, you have to like you can just let me know that you sign it, and then I can like put your signature. So you send me a copy of your signature that I can just put on there. But if you don't sign it, then it comes back to the Senate for further review and conversation. So amendments and resolutions. Yeah. 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 So you just tell me that you so if your name would still be on the bottom, like, but you would just like tell me that you don't want to sign it, and then like a week would pass or whatever, and then we come back to the Senate and for an amendment, and they would then need like a 5-6 vote to go before like so just let me know if you don't want to email me. Text me, like, do whatever, just let me know, or you can just call me, like, yeah, yeah, anytime. Yeah. I didn't do it.
So opening prayer will be Eliza. If you could.
God, we come to you in prayer and thank you for the opportunity to be gathered here today. And we remember the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. For Isaiah said he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. Help us never to forget that Jesus was numbered with the transgressors and that he bore the sins of us all. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Okay, awesome. Roll call. Okay, everyone. Today's question of the day is: what is everyone's favorite Easter candy? Pretty exciting. Michael Camilleri.
Here, I would say Peeps.
Okay, Madison Denchfield.
Here, jelly beans.
Matthew Dunn.
The Reese's M&Ms.
Destiny Harris.
The Reese's Easter egg.
Charlie Bacon. Charlie. Yep. Okay, Caitlin Curtin.
I would also say jelly beans.
Richard Camus.
Reese's Easter eggs.
Pat Deason.
Probably Peeps.
Kyle Lochner.
The Cadbury eggs.
Annie Tomko.
Also Cadbury eggs.
Luke Williams.
I like chocolate.
Solid. Karen Wilson.
Reese's egg.
Michelle Savarino.
Like a chocolate bunny.
Edward Curry.
I'll also have to go Reese's eggs.
Jack Rankin. Jack. Okay. John Gibbons.
If he likes marshmallow filled chocolate bunnies.
Adeline Clemmer.
I'll do Reese's eggs.
Kate Rector.
Jelly beans.
Anna K. Carlisle. Excuse me.
Eggs.
Joey McClelland.
I'll go with the jelly beans as well.
Connor Clement. Clement.
Jelly beans.
Angelica Cerna.
The Reese's bunnies.
Riley Evers. Elena Rawson.
The Pink's bunny peeps.
Ben Solman.
The Cadbury eggs.
James Colley.
Cadbury eggs.
Michael Heffernan. Michael? No? Okay. Kyle. Oh gosh. Cykoleski.
Jelly beans.
Jelly beans, and there was no comment on the last name pronunciation. Okay. Teo off.
Oh, Tayo.
Tayo.
Probably Kit Kats.
Laurel Hamilton.
The Reese's Pieces in the carrot bag.
That's solid. Reed Ragsdale. I think he's the purple. Okay. Gabriel Polanecki.
Chocolate, just chocolate bunny.
Bella Vasquez. I think she's okay. Perfect. Molly Schwartz, I think, is also abroad. Lily Easter. She's on campus? Yeah, that's my guy. You're good. She's abroad. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought I heard that somewhere. Living Easter? No, okay. Caitlin Garcia. Patrick Mulligan.
He's under the law arch.
Okay.
Go prime rib.
You know what? Fair. Michaela Conley. Emma Herron. Amos Gracie. Bridget Fisher. Leah Applin.
Heaps.
Diego Gonzalez.
Either right.
Andrew Ryan.
Wrong.
Kelsey Casella. Leah Wong.
Actual eggs.
Danny Ward.
Greasy egg.
Elijah Jones. Sam Robinson.
Brock's jelly beans.
Me, Reese's Eggs. Joseph Tooney. And Joseph Tooney. Megan Klein. Megan Klein. Jerry Vilhar.
Ferrero Rocher's.
Sonia Lumley.
Skittles.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. We need a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes.
We'll now vote on the approval of the minutes. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstain? Awesome, they're approved. Yay.
And then just a couple of announcements, and I am sorry, this was going to look up to be a very brief meeting, but I do have to give my parliamentary procedure presentation today. So we will have a presentation on parliamentary procedure for everyone, just so you become more aware of the process. But to start off with, if you look at item B, we do have a committee on the Constitution interest form. So the committee on the Constitution is where all substantive amendments to the Constitution kind of end up before they come before Senate for consideration. And per the Senate bylaws, and I think the Constitution actually, we do need a minimum of 3 senators to serve on the committee on the Constitution, along with the at-large members, as well as the vice president and the judicial council president, and then I chair the committee. We might try to meet once before the end of the school year if it works out for everyone. If not, we'll be meeting starting in the fall and stuff like that. But I'd encourage you guys, if you want to be on a committee that deals with those topics, fill out the interest form, and then next meeting we'll probably have like some sort of election to elect all those individuals interested. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know, or feel free to let me know. Raise your hand with whatever works.
Yeah, and the only announcement I have today is remember to fill out your slide for the Senate directory, just so we can know who you are, put face. No, you're totally fine. And yeah, put face and name. So yeah, we'll get started on the presentation now.
Sometimes.
Fun times. Yeah.
So I guess we'll just hop into some things because I know that most of you guys are new to Senate, and so it's always good to know what the procedure is, just so you can participate well and that we can have our smooth and efficient meetings as humanly possible. So just like some quick foundational definitions. So Sonia, or the vice president, is the head of the Senate. So she's in charge of calling on people, all that sort of fun stuff, ruling on certain motions, things like this, things like that. Up here where we sit or stand is the dais. And then we do operate on a few definitions surrounding vote totals. So a majority vote is 50% of all present voting members plus 1 individual. And then a supermajority would be 2/3 of all present voting members. So those are just for like orders, for like if we're amending the Constitution, that requires a 2/3 vote, whereas a resolution requires a majority vote. And then we do require a quorum to operate. So in order for us to conduct any business here at all, to even hang out and talk or whatever, we do need at least 2/3 of all voting members to be present. And guys, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please just raise your hand for a point of inquiry and just say it, and I'm more than happy to answer. So in terms of the governing documents of the Senate itself, we kind of operate on this tiered system. So ultimately, the Constitution is in charge of everything that we do here within the student union. And below that, we have the Student Senate bylaws, which also govern our operations. And then below that, so anything that's not covered in those documents, there's this book called the Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure. It's about 250 pages. And that's kind of one of my main jobs, is to kind of know the ins and outs of that and regarding like certain motions and other things that can be made in our meetings and any sort of procedural things that it mandates. So that's kind of how it goes. So if there's any violations between this, we just start at the top and work our way down. So in terms of how meetings kind of operate, I know we're all pretty familiar with it at this point, but we always start with a call of order from the chair, and then we go to roll call, approval of the minutes, executive announcements, and then we talk about general orders or current business. And then the new business section is there just for everyone to be aware of. And then we have announcements and adjournments. So specifics will be circulated for the agenda at least 24 hours prior to each meeting. So this is a requirement in the bylaws, actually. So before every single meeting of the Senate, at least 24 hours before. Everyone does have to be given an agenda, or else that is in violation of our governing documents, which is never a good thing. So just a brief overview of roll call. So the secretary calls the roll for attendance, and this determines quorum and voting thresholds. So voting thresholds are not constant, like throughout meetings. It's not all voting members, as I mentioned, it's just present ones. And then just a little quick recap in terms of permitted absences. So senators can have up to 6 absences, and having more than 6 absences will sadly result in the secretary being mandated to report you to the Student Union Ethics Council, which is no fun. No one wants to do that. So please come to Senate, guys. I don't know. I think it's a fun time here. And if you cannot attend a meeting, you are like we do ask that you do fill out a proxy form, just because this does allow you to still have some representation for your constituents in the room. So that's a very important thing. I know those have been circulated in the past. Just wanted to reiterate that. So in terms of Senate members, I know I've talked about it briefly, but I just want to go over a very just in more in-depth overview. So all the voting members are the senators, the OCC senators, the class presidents, the OCC president, the OCC vice president, and the CCC president. So those are all the people who can vote, and then everyone else who's in the Senate cannot vote or make motions. Yes.
So that means there's a total of 38 voting members because there's those 6 plus the 32 norms.
Yes.
So theoretically, like it could be 50-50.
If there is a tie, so if there's ever a tie in the Senate, Sonia or the vice president or whoever is serving as chair of the Senate at that time breaks the tie. So that's what happens if there are any ties, which is why Sonia is actually not technically considered a non-voting member of Senate, because she's the chairperson of the Senate. And then everyone else are non-voting members of Senate. One important thing to keep in mind is that if you are a non-voting member of Senate, you are actually not allowed to make motions either. So like, yes, you can't vote, but you also cannot motion for anything. So you can't motion to approve the minutes or to move to debate or anything along those lines. So just something to keep in mind. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to let me know. And then when it comes to speaking privileges, everyone has universally, like every member of Senate does have speaking privileges. So you raise your hand, and if Sonia recognizes you, then you are able to speak on the Senate floor. But as I mentioned, non-voting members cannot make motions. And if any individual who maybe is from your dorm or you're friends with, or just anyone who you think should speak in Senate who is not enumerated in the Constitution to speak in Senate, you can yield your time to them. So I know like at the first Senate meeting, for example, when I replaced Thomas Musgrave as the parliamentarian, I yielded my time to Thomas a couple of times so he can make a few comments and stuff like that. So if you do ever think that anyone else should be heard in Senate, you can just yield your time to them. And when it does come to the minutes, so minutes are taken for every meeting by the secretary, and they are actually published following their approval. So we approve them at the next meeting, and then they are published online. Minutes and videos, because Senate meetings are also recorded, are only not published if there is a motion to close the meeting, in which case those portions of the minutes or those portions of the video are not published online as well, but they are on the Senate website. So if you ever want to go back and reference anything, you can find that there. So the Senate does have a couple of powers. It does have a few powers. So I'll start off with one of the Senate powers. So the Senate has a power to pass resolutions, right? So resolutions are one of the pieces of legislation that we can pass, and it really just constitutes a call for action. And resolutions require a majority vote, and they must be signed by the president. And let's say, for example, Jerry didn't want to sign one of the resolutions that the Senate passed. It would require a 3/4 majority to overrule it. In the Constitution, it says 2/3, but then in the Senate bylaws, we actually increase that threshold to 3/4. So it would require 3/4 of a vote to overrule a lack of signature from the president if we want to pass a resolution. This kind of works in collaboration with a lot of kind of campus governance authorities here and there. It's supposed to go hand in hand with intense communication and stuff like that. Like there was a resolution last term to increase communication between student government and rec sports, or concerning a puddle on campus, stuff like that, like stuff that we do not have direct authority over, but hopefully it's meant to kind of encourage us to work better with campus partners, or hey, we think that this should happen, so we just kind of call for it to make sense. And then the Senate also has the power to pass orders. So orders include the execution of the explicit powers that Senate has. This requires a 2/3 vote to pass. So like today, we're voting on an order to amend the Constitution. That's something that's kind of explicitly within the Senate powers. Most orders do not require a president's signature. So if we're suspending an election or anything like that, that is within the Senate's authority. So the president does not need to sign those documents. However, if we're amending the Constitution, this does require the president's signature. And if you have any ideas for amending the Constitution or anything like that, before you bring it to the Senate for consideration, you first have to go through a lengthy process that begins by kind of showing that amendment to myself and the Judicial Council President per the Constitution to ensure there aren't any major implications from your proposed amendment. And in the case in which, let's say, the president decides not to sign one of the amendments the Senate passes via an order, it would require a 5/6 vote to overrule the president in that sense. Senate also has the power to pass letters, which is like an inquiry or it's a point of information. They're not really used that much anymore, but if we were to kind of have a letter or something along those lines and we were to pass that, it is required to be presented by the president within 1 week to the Student Affairs Office. So it's just like, hey, if we have a question or anything like that for any sort of like administrative purposes. So that's the other thing the Senate can do. So diving back into kind of the category of how we go about our Senate meetings, we do have our general order section. So these consist of all the items to be presented, debated, and potentially voted upon during the Senate. So these are the things that you'll make motions about or that you'll talk about. And you should be familiar with all the items in general orders. That's one of the reasons why we have the new business category. So hopefully coming into each meeting, you're familiar with them to a certain extent. If you have any questions on how to format the aforementioned order, resolutions, or letters, there is a legislative formatting code on the Senate website that kind of gives the detail as to how to format them. And I am more than happy to help you or send you any templates or anything like that. One of my jobs is to help you guys write legislation. So if you have any questions with that, or if you have an idea and you're just not sure how to formulate it, like shoot it off to me and I will draft it up for you with your intense feedback, obviously. And so, yeah, that's one of my functions here. So let's say that you do have a piece of legislation and you do want that to go on the agenda. So all Senate business must first be sent to the Vice President, Parliamentarian, and our wonderful SAO advisor, Mo. So you have to send this to us 48 hours before a Senate meeting. So by Monday at 5:30, I guess, is the constitutional as the bylaw requirement. We have weekly meetings on Monday where we talk about legislation and we kind of talk about legislation going on the agenda and stuff like that, determine what legislation gets put on the agenda. And so that's kind of the purpose of that timeline. And the Vice President or the Chairperson of the Senate also does have the power, if you do submit a piece of legislation to be reviewed by Senate, to kind of assign that legislation to a committee or to a relevant department within the executive branch or within the executive cabinet for further review and discussion. So it's not always like you write something, it's not necessarily guaranteed to immediately go on the agenda. There could be a longer review process with that. And if it's all good, if it meets all the benchmarks, then the item is added to a new business for consideration of the Senate. So now let's dive into general orders procedure. So obviously we've seen that we have like readings or presentation followed by Q&A and debate. So Q&A, you can ask questions of the main sponsor of the bill, and it's not a forum for debate. And then we make the motion to transfer into debate, and that is where you see a lot of motions or any issues that anyone may have personally with the bill being raised. And then we have multiple actions that can be taken because those bills or those pieces of legislation in general orders do need to be addressed by the Senate as a whole. So we can either postpone consideration of said legislation, we can amend the legislation and then vote on the legislation, or we can make a motion to refer it to committee. I get into some of these motions later on, but there are a lot of different options that you guys can go about besides just voting down a piece of legislation or voting for a piece of legislation. So as I mentioned in the presentation, the primary sponsor reads the piece of legislation out loud, but you can make a motion to dispense with the reading. It's normal practice. And it must be made before the sponsor begins to read the document, or else they have to keep on reading the document, which is no fun. So as soon as we get into general orders, as soon as we transfer there, like just make a motion to dispense with the reading, like go for it. Like you don't even need to be prompted if you don't want to, because you guys have the power to make motions and stuff as you guys kind of want to, and then it's up to the discretion of the chair whether to accept those motions or to consider those motions, depending on which one it is. And then we get to Q&A. Like I mentioned, you ask the sponsor questions regarding the legislation, and the primary sponsor may answer or designate someone else to answer. And you can actually motion to limit time on Q&A, and I'll also get into how you can do this for debate as well. But for example, you can motion to impose, like I raise my hand, well, I can't motion, but let's say a senator would raise their hand and say, I motion for 10 minutes of Q&A with
30-second answers and 1 minute, sorry, 30-second questions and 1 minute answers or something like that. Like you're more than welcome to do that, or kind of impose your limit as how you see would be fit, like capping total time or capping question and answers, stuff like that. You're more than welcome to do if you think that that's helpful. And then, so within debate, we then have a motion to move in debate from questioning. And so debate can be limited. So you can either do this in your initial motion to move into debate. You can say, hey, move in debate and limit debate to like 10 minutes, or we're in debate and you're like, I motion to limit debate on this topic for 10 minutes total with 30-second speaking times or something like that. You can kind of, you have discretion in that sense. One thing that is important to recognize is that debate must always be germane to the topic at hand. So if we're debating like a piece of legislation regarding amending a portion of the Constitution, I can't go on a tangent about how I think the dining hall food like could be better or something like that. Like it just has to be related. So just ensure that that's something that's important. And then the chair also is in charge of recognizing the speakers. And this is based on the number of times that members of Senate have already previously spoken. So if I speak once and then there are other hands up, I should not be called on immediately after that. It should be as even as possible. Obviously, it's not always exact, but that's the principle at least. And within debate, this is also where you see more common motions like amendments proposed and things along those lines. So diving into the amendment process, it gets a little complex, but there are different types of amendments. So we have amendment by addition, so you can add something to a document if you think it should be added. You can delete something from a document via amendment by deletion. You can do an amendment by striking out and inserting, so removing and adding something, or you can do an amendment by substitution. So amendments always must be like germane to the general topic at hand, and they can be hostile. And what I mean by this is that an amendment can change the meaning of the legislation like significantly. The only exception to this is that it cannot change an affirmative statement into like a negative statement. So you can't be, if there's a piece of legislation saying we're going to hire someone, you can't then amend that to say we're not going to hire someone, because that would be the exact same thing as just voting against a piece of legislation. So that would be the exception to that rule. Briefly, actually, just to mention, oh, sorry. Got ahead of myself. Oh, I'm moving the wrong direction. There we go. There we go. Sorry, guys, for the long presentation, by the way. One thing that is important to note is that the amendments by substitution is actually one of it does kind of borderline on the germane requirement, in the sense that if they're that you can very much so substantially change or completely replace or alter the current legislation on the floor, as long as it deals with a similar topic, or it's kind of the similar topic, if that makes sense. So if we want to refer something to if we had a resolution calling for a meeting with someone, you could make a motion to amend by substitution to set up to create a committee on the issue to discuss amongst ourselves or something like that. So as long as it's semi-related, that's all you need to do. Did you have a question? Sorry.
No, you just answered. Thank you.
No, of course. And then amendments do have 2 ranks. So at any given point, there can be a maximum of 2 amendments on the floor at a time. So there are primary amendments and secondary amendments. So let's say that there is a piece of legislation and I motion to amend that piece of legislation, then that would be considered a primary amendment. And someone, if they wanted to, could then make a motion to amend my amendment to the piece of legislation on the floor. However, amendments beyond the secondary are ruled out of order by the chair, should be ruled out of order by the chair, because then it just kind of gets borderline dilatory. Like what if we have 6 amendments all on top of each other? It gets a little out of hand. So that's the rule regarding that. And then upon the proposal of an amendment, debate is limited to the amendment. So if someone makes a motion to an amendment, to amend a document, we don't have to vote on that immediately. We can debate it for a little bit because amendments are debatable, but that debate is automatically constrained to just that amendment in question, and same if the secondary amendment is proposed. Amendments then have 2 further types. There are friendly amendments and there are unfriendly amendments. So friendly amendments are when the sponsors or the primary authors of the piece of legislation are completely fine, or they accept the amendment in question. So before the legislation is stated by the chair, so you know how when we move into general orders, Sonia will read the title of the order or something like that out loud. So before Sonia reads that title out loud, If someone has an amendment, you're more than welcome to approach a sponsor or a primary or the authors of that amendment, and you're more than welcome to just kind of fix that yourselves, or you can even make a motion to amend is before Sonia reads the name of the document out loud, and if someone accepts it, it automatically happens without the need for a vote. Otherwise, if it's still a friendly amendment and it's made after Sonia reads the name of the document out loud, the practice is for the chair to then ask for unanimous consent for the amendment. If the sponsors agree with it, that's normally how it goes. It doesn't have to happen in that sense, but that's normally how it goes for friendly amendments. For unfriendly amendments, this happens when the primary authors or the sponsors of the legislation reject the amendments someone proposed. So in this case, this would then require the amendment motion to have a second to it, and then it would be debatable and it would require a majority vote to pass. This kind of operates on the principle that as soon as the chairperson reads a motion out loud or restates a motion that someone makes, it no longer belongs to you, it belongs to the body of the whole. So that's kind of where these rules kind of stem from in that sense. And then we get into voting, guys. I know, riveting stuff. We have lots of ways to vote, but once we're in debate, you can make a motion to close debate or a motion to vote or a motion to close debate and enter voting procedure. And it's normally to the item at hand. That's kind of how it goes in that sense. Those are how those motions are made. And there are different methods of voting. So there are 5 different methods of voting. There's voting by general consent or unanimous consent. There's voice vote. There's a standing vote. There's roll call vote. And there's voting by ballot, which is fun. Oh, really quickly, let me probably give a brief overview of them actually. General consent, as we know, unanimous consent, the chair just requests for that. Voice vote, the chair, so to give a little bit of context, the chairperson does have the authority to determine what voting method they think is best for any given motion. So if there is a voice vote, for example, the chair would determine the outcome of that vote by the yays versus the nays. And then a standing vote, that happens. You can also motion for any of these voting methods, but a standing vote is literally what it sounds like. We have everyone in favor stand up, and then we have them sit down, and everyone opposed stand up and sit down. This is kind of replaced by how we raise our hands in this setting at least, but we can motion for that as well. And then there's a roll call vote. We read down the list of roll and you say yes, no, or abstain. And then there's also a ballot, a secret ballot, which is used normally when someone makes a motion to close a vote, which you guys do have the authority to do, in which case a Google form will be sent out to you guys, and then we'll review the results and we'll announce them to you so no one knows how anyone voted. And yeah, so that's what we have in terms of voting methods, which is fun. Now let's go over some brief motions that you guys do have the ability to make at any time. So privileged motions, as soon as you make them, that means that they must be dealt with practically immediately. So if you make a motion to adjourn, that must be dealt with immediately by the chair. Make a motion to recess, likewise, or if you have a question of privilege. And so I think we all kind of know what a motion to adjourn is, but a motion to recess, you can set a time frame if you want. So theoretically, you could make a motion to recess for 10 minutes or make a motion to recess until a given point. And then that would be one of the more disruptive motions. So it would have to immediately be considered by the chair unless there was a motion to adjourn on the table. And then it would require a second, it's debatable, and recess requires a supermajority. And then if you have a question of privilege, this is also something that you can raise your placard and even interrupt us about. It's like, hey, I think the room is too hot. Hey, can we please lower one of the blinds? That's kind of a question of privilege as to yourself and your own personal comfort or the comfort of the assembly at large. So it's not even a motion, it's not debatable, and there's no vote required. It's just kind of a form of a request that has to be dealt with immediately. Then we have subsidiary motions, which are motions that are kind of second to the aforementioned motions that I mentioned. And these kind of fall under the category of dealing with a piece of legislation that's on the floor. So contrary to popular belief, per the standard code of parliamentary procedure, it's slightly different than other kind of rules and regulations regarding debate. We don't have a motion to indefinitely or permanently table a piece of legislation, but we do have a motion to postpone a piece of legislation temporarily. So you can motion to postpone a piece of legislation, in which that means that the legislation cannot be considered for the rest of the Senate meeting, or you can set an exact time or an exact day at which the piece of legislation can be reconsidered. And then obviously we have a motion to close debate, and that's kind of how we transition into voting procedure. And then you can make a motion to limit debate, which does require a supermajority. As previously mentioned, you can specify how you want debate to be limited. And then you can also, as I mentioned, postpone temporarily, yes, but also postpone documents to a set time. And then you can also make a motion to refer things to a committee. So for example, today we do have a constitutional amendment kind of on the floor for consideration. If you guys really wanted to, instead of voting in favor or against that constitutional amendment, someone could propose a motion to refer that constitutional amendment to the Committee on the Constitution, at which case the committee would take up the issue and debate it in a little bit more of a confined setting. Or you could specify different departments or anything like that that you think would be helpful. And then we have a motion to amend as well that you can deal with for these 4 pieces of legislation on the floor. Then we have incidental motions, which kind of appear as events happen, like if an incident happens. So let's say that Sonia, that the vice president or the chairperson were to example, like rule an amendment is out of, like rule that a motion is out of order or rule it dilatory. So out of order, i.e. it's like not proper at this time, or dilatory in the sense that it's like obstructing debate. I'll dive into that later. That you can appeal the ruling of the chair on issues. It's just a simple motion, it's debatable, and it requires a majority to overrule any of like the chair's rulings. You can motion to suspend the rules of the standard code of parliamentary procedure, which consists of a lot of the motions that I've been mentioning. That requires a supermajority, so we can't suspend the Senate bylaws. So those are always set in place, but we can suspend other rules. And then we can also make a motion to consider informally, which requires a majority. That's if like we have, let's say we have a bunch of pieces of legislation on the floor that are maybe all tangentially related to each other, and we don't like the idea of limiting debate to one or the other, as is the practice. You can make a motion to consider informally, which is similar to suspending the rules, in which case like debate would be expanded and it would just become a much more informal setting in the Senate itself. So that's another thing that you have at your that you can use. And then we also have a large variety of incidental requests. So these are things that you can raise if you have any questions or anything like that. So point of order, let's say that I do something wrong, or I advise Sonia incorrectly, and you're like, hey, Sam made a mistake. You can raise your hand, say point of order, interrupt us, and say, hey, you made this mistake, and then we can deal with that or correct ourselves. If you have a question, these are referred to as parliamentary inquiry, point of parliamentary inquiries. Raise your hand, say you have a point of inquiry. You can interrupt anyone, and then we will answer your question. And then you can also withdraw a motion. This is like, hey, you propose something and you want to withdraw the motion that you proposed. Someone can object to this. Normally the chair asks for like unanimous consent for this. So if you were to propose a motion to limit debate, as you were to make that motion, you can withdraw it without having to have a vote on it, as long as Sonia does not repeat that motion first. But if Sonia repeats that motion, the motion becomes like the property of the Senate, in which case the chair normally asks for general consent to withdraw the motion. And if someone objects to that, then we can go into a formal vote on it. And then there's the request to vote by division of the question. I know we might have mentioned this previously, but let's say that there is a piece of legislation and you're in favor of some parts of it, but not all of it. You can make a request to divide the question, or you can make a request to kind of split up the legislation, if that makes sense. And you can specify how you want the legislation to be split up. And then it's at the discretion of the chair as to whether the chair then rules if they believe that splitting up the legislation in that form is acceptable, or if the legislation is too interconnected for it to be split up. And if the chair rules that it isn't too interconnected, the legislation is automatically split how you proposed it. It's not a motion. It doesn't require a vote or anything like that. But if you do disagree with the chair's ruling on the matter, then you can propose it as a motion if you disagree with how the vice president were to go about that. And then there's also a motion for division of assembly. Let's say you don't believe the vote count. You can motion to divide the assembly, which would require a standing vote. Or show of hands again. It's just if you don't think the vote count was accurate, so we can redo that. Now we're nearing the end. Don't worry, guys. Stay with me. Again, I'm sorry. It's just some helpful tips and tricks for navigating Senate. Let's say that someone was being really out of order in Senate, or they were behaving in a dilatory fashion. So this is like the improper and obvious delay of procedure. Let's say that I get really loud and really annoying and I start yelling or whatever. I'm behaving in a dilatory fashion, which is not acceptable for Senate procedure. If you keep on making, like, if you make the exact same motion over and over and over and over and over again with the express purpose of delaying Senate, that's just not acceptable behavior here. And that's something to consider. You also cannot attack an individual. So you can't, like, if I say something, or if someone or a senator says something, you can't be like, oh, that person is just a terrible, awful person, awful intent, all that stuff. Like, you can't attack an individual, but you can attack their ideas or their proposals and stuff like that if you want to engage in productive debate. This can result in disciplinary action, i.e. like you can be ruled out of order or you can be potentially ejected from the room. Within the standard code of parliamentary procedure, the chair can rule you out of order and does have the right to eject you from the room, or there can be a vote to eject you from the room. And then obviously there's always the other avenue of the Student Union Ethics Council that can kind of be like gone down. Hopefully this never has to happen. And there's always also the possibility of censure, things like that. So let's just be nice to each other. Yeah.
When you remove a senator, is it solely through ethics or can you also do it this way?
Yeah, so you can't, you're not permanently removed. And under this thing, it's just like, let's say you're like, I'm yelling and I'm screaming and stuff like that. Like Sonia could be like, hey, you're out of order, like get out of the room. Or you guys could vote to kick me out of the room. Like it's just like temporarily, I'm still parliamentarian in that sense. But there are other methods to pursue for permanent removal for office if that's something that people think is necessary. And then we got to new business, finally, guys. Whoop, whoop. But so this is where newly added items are there for consideration. They're not going to be debated on or considered. Keep in mind that as senators this week, that items are in new business are intended for you to kind of talk to your dorm about it and get their opinions. Like HallGov is on Tuesdays. Agendas are circulated on Tuesdays. Look at that agenda, let your constituents know, so that next week when we come back to Senate meeting, not even the next day, but the week after that, you do have some general ideas on how you want to vote or what your opinions on the legislation are for, just so we can move more productively. And obviously items can be moved from new orders to general orders, from new business to general orders via unanimous consent motion. And yeah, that's all that I have for you guys. Does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry that it was like I just talked at you guys for a significant period of time. Any questions or anything like that? If you do, just feel free to raise your hand and say parliamentary point of inquiry, and we have to respond anyways. So yeah, thank you guys for bearing with me.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Okay. Oh,
Where's it?
escape is
Oh,
over
I
here.
can even see it.
Yeah.
Look at that. There it is.
So we're here now. Okay, awesome. Now we're in general orders. So item A is SO 2526-04 in order to clarify oversight of the student union archives.
Motion to dispense with the readings.
We'll now vote on the motion to dispense of the reading. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstain? The reading is dispensed with. We are now in questioning.
Any questions? I read the order.
Everyone can edit on this. That's too. Oh, no.
That's my bad. Sorry.
Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you.
I can only just put a bullet point in there. Yeah, the authors will
I'll
edit
fix
that
that.
now.
Yeah. That's weird. It shouldn't be possible. Okay, that should be fixed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
As a question, when the student union historian position was it made in order to relieve the secretary of their job? Or some of the workload of it, or was it kind of made in a separate idea and
Yeah.
thought process and then it kind of just overlapped?
So my understanding is that the student union historian position was made because you saw a lack of engagement on the part of the student union secretary in pursuing the creation or maintenance of the student union archive. And it has been the intention for a little bit now to clarify this in the Constitution, in the sense that it's really meant to kind of be like, hey, there wasn't much progress gone over here. We understand that you have a ton of other responsibilities. Let's move this very large and kind of arduous over to this new position that was created previously. So it's just clarifying that and who has the ultimate authority over that. Thank you for the question.
I see you and Elijah are listed as co-sponsors. I was curious, did you guys collaborate with the current student union secretary, just because this obviously would be impacting the role?
I actually did not email Catherine, which is my fault, Catherine. I am so sorry. But my understanding, that was my bad. That was an oversight on that part. But again, the understanding is that the historian, the archives currently exists on the J Council website, and the secretary, at least in recent time, has not had any interaction with the maintenance of the archives, and this would not impact the secretary's role in terms of publishing minutes or anything like that. So it's viewed more as kind of like a formality and just kind of like a clarification in the Constitution to remove redundancy.
Questioning and debate.
We'll now vote on the motion to move out of questioning and into debate. All those in favor? All oppose? All abstain? We are now in debate.
Yeah, just briefly, I see no reason for this not to be implemented. As parliamentarian, obviously, I more so am involved with kind of ensuring the effective processes of the student union. And there just exists a redundancy in the Constitution at this point. And in practice, the student union secretary has no role in or takes no role in the maintenance or in the maintenance or creation of the student union archives, which is an ongoing task. And so I just think it makes sense to kind of centralize this responsibility onto one person, into one individual.
I just want to propose a friendly amendment to strike all sections or all, it's the first line on the second page where it reads and all subsections and references thereafter and thereof or numbered accordingly.
Yeah, so just to advise as my parliamentarian role really quickly. So there was an amendment to the legislative formatting code put forward at the end of last Senate term that was passed by the Senate, which now requires amendments to be structured like this, even though nothing is really renumbered in this case. The structure and the wording is mandated to be like this per a Senate order from the last term, which amended the formatting code.
Motion to move out of debate into a vote.
We will now vote on the motion to move out of debate into a vote. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstain? We will now vote on Order SO 252604 in order to clarify the oversight of the student union archives. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstain? Awesome, it passes. Okay. So now we have nothing in new orders, or general order.
Leah has a-
Oh, yeah, one.
Sorry if I mess up the terminology of a point of inquiry. As from what I can find like online in our Senate, on the Senate website, the most recent constitution is the February 16th of 2024.
Yes.
Yeah.
Considering that we're like constantly making changes to the constitution.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's been over a year, is there more?
To kind of give a little bit of context to that. So it has been updated per last Senate term. Last time it was updated, I do believe, is February. I'm in the process of getting access to the actual Word document of the Constitution, so the amendments can be added in. If I don't get access to the Word document like today or tomorrow, I was just going to convert the PDF into a Word document. It might mess up the formatting, but it would just be necessary at that point. There's just been a little bit of delay in some of the transition things, and that document, for whatever reason, has never been present in like the shared drive in this sense. So that is something that will be fixed very, very swiftly. And if you have any specific questions about anything, feel free to let me know, and I'm more than happy to schedule a meeting or to email you and answer any concerns.
So Leah, it says 2024, but it's actually 2025.
Yeah, it should be 2025.
The billing
Yeah.
is February 2025.
Yeah, it should be 25. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 25.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we will now move into, oh yeah, oh, sorry. What did I say?
Move item A from new business to general orders.
We will now vote on the motion to move item A into general orders. All those in favor? All opposed? Abstain? Okay, awesome.
Right.
Point of inquiry?
Does that cause the others?
Yeah, so it would have to.
Oh, sorry.
Just-
Unanimous consent. We'll now vote on the unanimous consent to move item A into general orders. All those in favor?
Just ask for objection.
Oh, any objections? Sorry.
Yeah.
Any objections? Okay, no objections. We'll move it now into general orders.
Just-
My bad. Okay. All right.
Motion to suspend the reading.
We now vote on the motion to dispense of the reading. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstain? The reading is dispensed with. We are now in questioning. We now vote on the motion to move out of questioning and into debate. All those in favor? All opposed? Abstain? We are now in debate.
Motion to move out of the debate and into a vote. Second.
We will now vote on the motion to move out of debate and into a vote. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstain? Okay. We will now vote on order SO 2526. It's 05 in order to suspend the UCF president and vice president election, and OCC senator vacancy election. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstain? Awesome. It passes. Great. Okay, for announcements, just make sure you fill out the form I sent for the executive cabinet departments. I made the deadline, I think Friday, so I would love if you guys could all get that in. But
Tomorrow, the class of 2027 is having an Easter egg hunt on North Quad. So if you're a sophomore and you're staying for break, make sure that you go. Obviously there will be candy, but will also be like, there will be a hidden Easter egg with like, access to like an e-gift card or like maybe bookstore merch. So, you know, any sophomores, tell them about it.
Applications for sub general members closes this Friday at midnight. It's not really an application, it's really just a form and we take everyone. So if you want to get involved with sub next year, fill it out. Sorry, Mo, you didn't hear that. Fill it out and reach out to me if you have any questions.
you had an announcement?
Just comes up.
Okay, awesome.
Applications for the sophomore class council close this Friday, so if you're a rising sophomore, fill out the Google form that was sent to you last Friday. And yeah, we'd love to interview you guys.
Couple announcements, again, just to reiterate, please fill out the committee on the Constitution form, ideally, like, I don't know, by after break, like by the end of break or something like that when we get back on Tuesday, if you do want to be on the committee on the Constitution. And also, I know I emailed a lot of you guys yesterday, sorry, but to just follow up with that, if you are in charge of an organization and you have any questions pertaining to bylaws or anything like that, just remember that your bylaws must be submitted to Judicial Council by May 1st. And if you have any further questions or you want to collaborate on revising them or anything like that, please shoot me an email. I am more than happy to help with that process.
Any more announcements? No. We need a motion to adjourn. We'll now vote on the motion to adjourn. All those in favor? All opposed? All abstain? Thank you guys. Have a great week. Happy Easter.
Another day make a difference.
Okay, we made it in the room.
Oh my God. Next time.